You are officially invited. Yes, you're invited to join us in Fertility Awareness Mastery. This is my 10-week program designed to help you gain confidence using fertility awareness. Whether you're actively avoiding pregnancy or looking to optimize your cycles for conception, we have a spot for you. We start on January 22nd. Are you ready to jump in? Head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program to reserve your spot today. That's fertilityfriday.com/group program. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 237. Welcome to the 237th episode of the Fertility Friday podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa from fertilityfriday.com, and this is your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. Happy New Year! As the first episode of 2019, I just want to take a moment and wish you a wonderful year. Now, I recognize that you might be listening to this episode well into the future, so it may not be 2019 when you're listening. But whenever you do listen to this episode, I just want to wish you an absolutely wonderful year, one that brings you joy and happiness and all the good things. And so I wanted to ring in 2019 with a bang. And so I'm sharing with you another Fertility Awareness Reality Series episode. So today we have an on-air client session with my client Dana. And in this session, there's a lot of really great tidbits and nuggets about fertility awareness charting. So I know you're going to appreciate it. We demystify the cervix, we talk about mucus, so we really get into the thick of it. And I would love to support you on your own fertility awareness journey. There are, at the time that I'm releasing this episode, there's about 2 weeks before we're jumping into Fertility Awareness Mastery. And starting on the 22nd of January, we're actually going to be jumping in and spending 10 weeks laser focused on fertility awareness charting. And so this program is like no other. We take quite a bit of time, especially in the very first few weeks of the program. We take some time to really go through the fertility awareness basics and really hammer out all the three main fertile signs. So we spend a great deal of time talking about cervical mucus charting, basal body temperature charting, cervical position charting. And really I share the kind of tips and tricks to feel much more confident in interpreting all three of these signs, no matter what the situation. And so over the years, I've seen so many different situations, so many different women's charts. And basically what I have for you is the key to all of those signs, the key to charting them effectively and feeling confident about them, because there's a lot of different nuances that can arise. So we spend some time doing that. But what I find is that after that first month or so your very first chart, you're well on your way, but with a ton of questions for me. So I've designed this program to go over a 10-week period to give you an opportunity to learn everything. But with fertility awareness, I love the analogy comparing fertility awareness to driving, because it's similar to driving in that you can't learn to drive by reading a book. You really have to get into the car and start driving. So a big part of the class and the program is for you to put everything into practice and have the opportunity every single week to be able to check in with everybody and ask all of your questions. And so we have a really great time. We have lots of fun, and we go into more depth of charting than you probably thought possible. So I'd love to have you in the group. If you are ready to take your fertility awareness knowledge to that next level, to feel really comfortable and confident in the method, or even if you have been kind of thinking about using it and if it's going to work for you, and you want to get to that place where you can really trust the method and you can really understand it and feel comfortable and confident using it. And so if that is you, then I would encourage you and invite you to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program, and you'll see information about the program, how to apply. And of course, you can always send me a message if you have questions about the program, if you're wondering if it's going to be a good fit for you. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. Now let's jump into today's episode with Dana. And I'm really excited to welcome my guest, Dana, to the show today. Dana is a member of my most recent 10-week Fertility Awareness Group Mastery program. And at the time of this recording, we are almost done. We only have a couple of sessions left. So we've been together for over 2 months now, and Dana's been charting with us. And so I'm really excited just to jump in and dive into her charts today. So thank you so much for being here, Dana.
Hi, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
And well, I mean, we actually became acquainted through a mutual friend, but just to get a sense of what your journey has been like, in terms of if you've ever used hormonal birth control before, and what drew you to choose fertility awareness as your, method of birth control at this stage of your life.
Okay. Well, right now I'm 38 years old. I started using hormonal birth control, the pill, when I was 19. And I used it up until I was about 32. So how many years is that? Like
13?
12 or 13. Yeah. So I've been off it now for 6 years. And so in the time that I've been off of it, I've just kind of been, I was not in a serious relationship. And so I wasn't really like needing birth control. And then I guess I'm trying to think of how I came to this, because it all happened this summer. I was in a serious relationship, and let me think of how to say it. I have been in a serious relationship for a couple of years now. And this summer I thought that I was pregnant. And we had been using the withdrawal method. So I thought I was pregnant, and then it turns out I wasn't. And I am not sure what happened there. I think I might have had like a really early miscarriage, but that's actually something, Lisa, that I want to talk to you a bit more about in one of my upcoming sessions with you. Mm-hmm. So previously I had been charting not in this way. I had just literally had this like very basic chart that I'm sure a lot of people, I was given it by my doctor, that all I tracked was when I had my period. Mm-hmm. And I thought it's funny now, like knowing how much detail you can get into, because I thought I was like really recording a lot by just tracking like when I had my period, and had a little calendar from the last few years, and thought I knew like more than like my friends about, my cycle. And really now that I know what detail you can get into, I'm like, there's so much knowledge that I'm learning that I didn't even know. So anyway, this summer, then it came up with me and my partner. We ended up having a talk, like, we don't want kids is what we decided. So, but after like having been on the pill for my 20s, and I just was like, I'm not going to go back on the pill. It's not an option. So I just started like looking online at different options, and that's how I came on this. And then I started listening to your podcast. So that is how I got to fertility awareness.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
So now I'm just hoping to use it. Well, okay. So I'm hoping to use it for birth control, like ongoing forever, but I'm also learning a lot about things that I just wouldn't have even known that were possible, like problems or issues that I just like was oblivious to before. So now I'm like really grateful that I got into it for the birth control, but now I think there's like a lot of other benefits for my health in doing it, which I'm excited about.
Oh, I love that you say that, because it's a great analogy for it, is like the iceberg analogy. Like it's like the tip of the iceberg is the birth control. Mm-hmm. That's what usually, or the trying to conceive. So the actual kind of mm-hmm. utility of, we're going to use this for a purpose. And then what you end up finding is that there's so much more. And I just want to ask just to get a sense. So when you decided to come off of birth control at 32, mm-hmm. what was the reason? Was it just like, I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was in a serious relationship then, and my partner wanted to try to have a baby.
Oh, okay. So you actually came off of it for the purpose of trying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then at some point you basically decided that you didn't want to go back on. Was there, because you didn't come off for, side effects or anything like that. So what was kind of the hesitancy to then go back on it?
Oh, well, so that relationship ended, and then I started dating again and was like, oh, maybe I'll go back on the pill, and kind of went back to my doctor a few times for different things or different like methods of birth control. And so I tried the pill again, maybe like for a few weeks, and just like the side effects like hit me then. I think it was because I had been off of it and then like tried to go back on, and I was like, I can't sleep. I feel crazy. Like it was like all of a sudden very pronounced, the like feeling. And it was like, okay, this is like, doesn't feel right to me. Just the bleeding like irregular and stuff. And then I think I went back to the doctor and tried to get the IUD, but that didn't go well. Like she tried to implant it. I don't know if I'm using the right word, insert it. Okay. So that actually ended up being kind of traumatizing just because it was so painful for her to put it in. And then she like, and so I like had her stop after a couple tries. And I like remember being in the room, and then she was like, oh, your cervix doesn't like being poked very much. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so mad right now. Like, I don't want anyone poking my cervix. Like, no, like, this is all wrong. Like, my cervix doesn't like being poked. And that made me like so angry and so emotional. And I'm like getting emotional just thinking about it. But that's kind of when I started to be like, I'm not gonna like do this kind of stuff anymore. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm really curious, just in general, not this isn't directed to you, Dana, but more so about women's experiences with IUDs. So as you may know, in addition to doing these on-air client sessions, I also have my Pure Reality series. And so I often and kind of regularly interview women who've had different experiences with birth control, just to give a space to share these experiences. And I mean, often the experiences are kind of on the negative side, right? But what I'm curious about is about the IUD. And so I'm really sorry that you had that experience. And from my understanding, it's not uncommon. And it seems like there's this misunderstanding in medicine that the cervix doesn't have any nerve endings or something like that. So then it's common practice to just insert things into the cervix with no type of anesthesia or even regard of how the woman is feeling. Mm-hmm. And so when you described it as traumatic and you were just like, no, like this isn't right. I'm really just glad that you said that, because I'm sure that there are women listening who've had the same experience. And not to go like too off track, but when I was in university, I had it was like this annual ritual, or that's not the word, but anyways, we'll go with it, of attending the vagina monologues. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or seen them or read the book. So there's a book, Eve Ensler, and I don't know the whole monologue, obviously, but there's this one monologue and the woman starts with, my vagina is pissed off. And then she goes on to describe like all the things that happen to our vaginas, whether it's, tampons, which are helpful, but often uncomfortable to insert sometimes. And it just made me think about that, because it isn't right. And women should be offered anesthesia, because it is extremely painful for many women to have IUDs inserted.
Yeah. But I ended up being really grateful that I didn't end up getting it in, because the feeling of just having someone poking me there, and then the idea of, I walked out of the office being like, I am so glad I don't have any like that I don't have to go back and have it taken out, or like that. I was just glad that it didn't work out.
Well, then let's shift to the current destination on your journey, which is now, actively using fertility awareness and charting for birth control. And so maybe share with me kind of where you're at with everything. So you've been charting then for a while within the group, and we've had like a one-on-one session together in the group. And and just to get a sense of what you'd like to focus on in our call today.
Okay. Well, I've been charting now. I'm in my third cycle of charting. So I'm getting more used to the habits and the notations, but I'm still, every time I'm doing a notation on what the sensation and description is every day, I'm like 70 or 80% sure I'm recording it correctly. What I think I've learned so far, and maybe you can like help me gauge this, is that I have a really low amount of cervical mucus compared to other people, which I would never have known if I didn't take this class. So I'm trying to just notice the difference in sensations because I don't have a lot of mucus to look at. And then I guess I'm hoping to learn more from you what some of the nuances is in what I am seeing, what in the small amounts that I am seeing, and just how to like best record that to keep going. And I've been trying to check my cervical position for the last cycle, and that is still something that I'm having trouble with.
Yes, which is very common.
Seen the light that you talk about.
Yeah.
I don't think I've discovered that yet.
Well, and okay, so I'm looking at your chart. Of course, the listeners can't see your chart, but I'm just curious, on days 13, 14, 15, 16, you have a question mark in the cervical position. Is that question mark because you didn't check or because you were like, I don't know what the heck is going on with my cervix today?
That's because I didn't check.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how life works, because that actually would have been the time that we wanted to know.
Oh, okay.
So your chart, based on your temperatures, it would appear as though ovulation happened likely around day 16, because, okay. After day 16, your temperatures, we see this sustained shift where they rise and they do stay higher for the rest of the cycle. So then those kind of critical 4 days prior to that shift then would have been potentially helpful for us to figure out the cervix. And the way I always talk about the cervix,
okay,
and you've heard me talk about it in the class, is that there's like this tiny window of an event that happens, and it's like on like a day where you go from having a softer feeling where your cervix is in a different position inside of your vagina to where it actually tilts and kind of goes to like it tilts, becomes firmer, closes, and there's like this happens from one day to the next, and it's quite abrupt. And then it's kind of like if you miss it, then you're kind of like, what's the big deal? I don't feel anything different.
Okay.
So, I mean, one of the challenges, as you mentioned, so just to give the listeners a sense, after your period, you're seeing several days of dry, and then you do see some observations of non-peak mucus that coincide with your ovulation, and then you go back to being dry again. So although so in this particular chart, so this is the like October to November chart, we're not seeing any peak mucus, but the only time that we are seeing mucus is on those days leading up to ovulation. So the way I like to talk about cervical mucus, I mean, there's two different perspectives we can look at. So on the one side, there's purely from a birth control, fertility awareness perspective. And then there's, of course, like, what are the larger implications of this? So there's like two aspects of it. So from a fertility awareness charting standpoint, regardless of how much you see, it doesn't even really matter, because any mucus that we see in the pre-ovulatory phase as you approach ovulation is an indication of your estrogen rising and all that. So we know then, based on your chart, even though you're not necessarily seeing quite a bit, we have information about when you kind of jumped into your fertile window, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So I just want to get a sense from you. I mean, in terms of how confident do you feel from just purely the charting perspective at this point in time?
I feel pretty confident. I feel confident in the idea of the fertile window and I'm not 100% confident, but I feel confident enough to be timing like when we have sex and when we're fertile and we're not. I feel more confident in the temperature reading than the mucus reading, and the least confident in the cervical position checking. But I think overall, I feel like 80-90% confident.
Well, that's good. Well, and one of the things I always say is, so when you're actively avoiding pregnancy, it could kind of seem like, I think I said this in one of my other on-air sessions actually, but there's a part, like there's often the sense of like, well, if my cycles aren't great, then maybe it'll contribute to me not getting pregnant. But what I always say is that when you do have kind of optimal mucus production and everything's kind of in order, then it is easier to chart. When your mucus production is optimal and your cycle is pretty average and healthy, then your fertile window is more defined. And then that makes it a bit easier because it's more obvious. So what we're seeing pre-ovulatory, and we talked about this in our hot seat, I think, but what we're seeing pre-ovulatory, at least in your November chart, was a couple of days where you're experiencing some dampness. So maybe tell me a little bit about that. And if you remember, were you seeing it just kind of once, or were you seeing that throughout the day?
Throughout the day. Just a like damp spot on the tissue, like before using the bathroom. I just kind of looks like a couple drops of something on the toilet paper with usually a smooth, sometimes dry sensation, but there's something there. It's not completely dry.
Well, and I've spoken about this on the podcast a lot. It's a really common observation. And I think, for instance, like for women who are using charting apps that have this wet designation, then because it can be kind of like, it feels kind of wet or damp, it can kind of be confused with mucus. So in your case, this is you're wiping and it's either dry, sometimes maybe smooth, and there's nothing there in terms of like you being able to test mucus, but there's like that little damp spot. So what I found is that can make it a little bit more challenging, because then you have this additional observation that you're paying attention to, and it's not mucus. And it can make it seem like you're fertile every day because there's something there.
What is it if it's not mucus?
So what happens is, I mean, it's related to the cervix.
Okay.
So I think we spoke about this a little bit, but when you have, so there's like a spectrum of kind of abnormal cervical cell abnormality. And so for some women who are frequently observing this dampness, and sometimes it gets to the point where it's actually quite, the toilet paper itself is quite wet when you're wiping. But again, it's not lubricative, it's dry or smooth. So it's coming from the cervix, but it's not mucus. And it's typically associated with abnormal cervical cells to some degree. It doesn't mean that you're on like the end of the spectrum, but it means that you're on there somewhere. It's really common. And I've said many times that at least 20% of my clients, I see this pattern. And so the pattern that I see is we have this wet or damp, I'll use the D word, discharge. And it happens throughout the cycle. So typically you'll see it both in the pre and post ovulatory phase. So in your cycle here, we're seeing it more so in the pre-ovulatory phase, a little bit in the post, but not really. And in your previous cycle, you saw it in the post-ovulatory. Yeah.
When it comes to the abnormal cells in the cervix, a few years ago, maybe like 7, 8 years ago, I had abnormal cells from when the doctor did a pap smear, and I ended up going back like every 6 months, like for several years for abnormal cells. And then eventually it like cleared up, and the doctor said like that I don't have abnormal cells anymore and it's cleared and I'm fine. Do you think that I just always have had abnormal cells and it didn't clear up? Or
I mean, the thing about this type of charting is that what we're seeing here is something so subtle that you wouldn't see it unless you were charting in this way. And so in that sense, it's kind of like the very first possible sign of something.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because no one starts out with like raging stage 4 cervical cancer. Let's just put the, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
when you're doing a PAP and they're detecting abnormal cells, like there's like a very kind of slow progression, this huge range of what you would see. And so when you're seeing a really subtle sign, like this little bit of dampness or wetness, we are on like the edge of the you know what I'm saying? Like it's, we're seeing this at the very sub level. So much so that some of my clients who have these types of observations will actually get a positive PAP and some won't. But what the research suggests, because there's research that has been done that I've spoken about where the researchers will give women certain nutrients. So they'll give the women folate for a period of time, or they'll give, they'll do like a vitamin A and they'll have them apply that to their cervix, and they'll do that for a period of time. And then these types of cell abnormalities go away or stop. Some of the women, it completely goes away. And then some of the women, they just start to regress, like meaning that it starts to get better. Whereas when they're comparing them to the control groups, it doesn't have that, like the placebo does not have that effect. So some of the researchers have come to the conclusion that maybe this is literally a sign of like a subtle nutrient deficiency. So, I mean, in this, what I've seen is the pattern of like, you see this wet stuff and it happens throughout the cycle and it happens consistently. And also women who have that observation typically have less mucus. And if they're able to replenish some of those nutrients, like we talked about in the group, like folate and vitamin A and those types of things, specifically kind of geared towards the cervix, then over time it goes away. We no longer see the wetness and dampness, and then eventually the mucus production improves. So there you have it. It's kind of like, to me, and based on the research, it would indicate a possible sign of a nutrient deficiency that when corrected goes away. And then the cervical mucus tends to improve the production. And then overall, you know, your cervix is healthy and it's not progressing.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. But in terms of charting, so the basic kind of stuff that I would encourage you to do as you continue to gain confidence in defining your fertile window is so currently right now, you're in the pre-ovulatory phase and we're seeing a couple more dry days, which is good. So what I would encourage you to always kind of keep thinking about is on a day-to-day basis when you're checking and wiping, is today essentially the same as it was yesterday? And that helps you to identify when you first move into your fertile window. So kind of like you're shifting into that point where you have mucus versus before you didn't. And then in terms of the cervix, it just depends if you're, if you're really wanting to get a handle on the cervix, then what time of day do you find to be the easiest to check?
The morning, like when I'm getting up and getting ready for the day. That's the best time for me.
Okay. Well, try to find a way to trick yourself into doing it every day. So whether that's having an alarm in your phone go off like at the right time where you would actually be in the bathroom getting ready, or putting up a Post-it on your bathroom mirror, check your cervix or something like that. So
I think for me, it's, sorry if I interrupted you, but it's not the remember, like I remember, but I'm just like dealing with like probably the frustration of like not like, oh, I'm not like, I didn't feel anything yesterday. So like, why do it again? Like, just like the motivation, not the remembering.
Okay.
Is like, oh, I'm not, I don't get it. Like I'm not going to get it. So I just like put it off or don't do it, which I know you've said multiple times, like just keep doing it for a full cycle and you'll understand. So I think I need to just keep doing it.
Well, but what you're saying is really important. It's really valid and it's really normal. And I hear it all the time. And there's women who are listening that are like, yeah, that's exactly right. Like it is confusing and I don't think I'm going to get it. And I have tried to check it and it doesn't change. And I mean, my suggestion really, like there's a couple, it's like, what can you tell yourself, right? Like how can you have a discussion with yourself to kind of trick yourself into doing it basically? So you could like, one way to look at it is you don't have to check your cervix every day, for the rest of your life. I feel like I could say that most women who use fertility awareness charting specifically don't necessarily check their cervix every day. Like there's some women who do and they really love it and it's a great sign for them, but Most women, I don't think do. I think most women, like women who kind of chart in the way that I teach, mucus is kind of central. And then temperature, for many women, temperature is central. So one of the ways you could look at it is like legit, if you can do it for one cycle, like if you could just force yourself to do it just every day for one cycle, then that is potentially the only time that you would do it every day. Because if you do it for the one cycle and you kind of get your head around that change, so you have to do it. So, so I'm saying this with love, Dana. So the previous cycle, you got like annoyed with it, which makes perfect sense because nothing was happening. But you got annoyed with it like right at the time that we needed the information. Yeah. So if you could just like, it's like whatever you need to say to yourself, just lie to yourself, whatever you need to say. But you just want to do it that once.
That's hilarious.
The one cycle.
It's like running a marathon and then just stopping before you like.
Yeah. And then picking it up back again after the end.
Funny. But
it makes total sense to me. Trust me. But yeah, so if you can just tell yourself that, because the goal isn't to like with mucus, that's the main sign. That's the sign you need to check every day. Temperature is really helpful, but with the cervical position, it's just what my suggestion to check it for one full cycle is just so that you can get it in your back pocket. Once you feel that change and that shift, then you're good. And so you can expect to feel confused and like you don't know what you're doing, because that's how it feels. And I've said this in the group before, which is that even my clients who feel confused and they come to me annoyed and they're like, Lisa, I was checking my cervix. Nothing happened. When I look at their chart, they're still showing me that there was a shift around ovulation and there was a shift after, even though they don't feel comfortable or confident about what they were seeing. And maybe you could try drawing it. So I know you're writing it down as soft, but maybe you could try, and just for the listeners, so Dana's using a paper chart, but maybe you could actually draw it. So like typically it's like a circle, and maybe if it feels firmer, like a full circle, like a filled in circle. If it feels more open, then you put obviously like an open circle. And then you could also kind of put, depending on whether it feels lower or higher, you can actually place the circle wherever it feels. I don't know, maybe drawing it would be helpful.
Okay.
Maybe not.
Okay. I'll see if I can do that.
Well, and then I suppose in terms of either the usefulness, especially because you are actively avoiding pregnancy, one of what I have found to be super helpful with the cervix is that it does change quite a bit post-op. So even here on your chart, where we were just joking about how you missed a couple days, what we see is that you did mark something different, and it coincides with your temperature and your mucus. So it went from soft to firm, and it does line up with the rest of your signs.
Okay.
So I don't know if you noticed that, but I see it.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't even sure what I was feeling that day, but that was the one day that I felt like something might be different.
And also remember the tilt we talked about. So for some women, it's not necessarily the firm, like every woman's a little bit different in her experience of her cervix, but for some women, feeling for the tilt, like which way is the opening pointing, for some women, that is like, that helps to clarify some things.
Okay. Well, that's good motivation. That's a good. So I know I'm looking at my chart and thinking that knowing what you just told me, and knowing that I probably only need to do it for like one more full cycle, that's good motivation too. So
yeah. Yeah, I just like to have additional tools in my tool belt. And I've spoken about this in the group as well, but I don't necessarily believe that every single woman has a checker cervix. Obviously, that's what came across in the way I just described it to you. In your case, I think it can be helpful because of what you said at the beginning, which is that, it's come to your attention that you have less a bit less mucus. And so when you're a little bit on the lighter side of in terms of how much mucus you're seeing, it can be helpful to have this additional sign. And that's the situation where I typically suggest it, whereas I don't suggest it heavily for every woman.
Okay.
Yeah. And you mentioned something like we don't need to go into a lot of depth here today, but you did mention that over the summer there was a point where you thought you were pregnant, weren't really sure, may have had an early miscarriage type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to just in a more general sense, I mean, now that you're charting, you would know right away.
Yeah.
There would be no like, I'm wondering. So now that you have a couple charts under your belt, you know about how long your luteal phase is, like so from ovulation to your next period. And so I find it interesting because so I've seen a lot of charts. I've seen a lot of charts where you have the 18 high temperatures and then a period. And if you weren't charting, you wouldn't necessarily know that that was a pregnancy chart.
Oh.
Even at like they call it chemical or like, there's all these words we can refer to it as. But when you ovulate, 12 to 14 days later, you're either going to have a period or you're pregnant. Like there's no third option.
Yeah.
I mean, the only other third option I'll put out there is if you have an ovulatory disturbance where you're like, there's legitimately an issue where you tried to ovulate, but the egg didn't get released. Like that's a more specific, like ovulatory disorder type of situation. Other than that, you're either pregnant or you're going to get your period. Nothing in between.
Yeah. I would have been able to see, because I knew it was late. My period was late, but I would have had a way better grasp on it. And then just, I would have known a lot more.
Well, and I'm just going to like pick up on what you said. My period was late. The other thing is that sometimes your period isn't late. Sometimes your ovulation was delayed and your period is right on time. And so I don't know what was happening in your case, but especially for women who typically have regular cycles where it typically does come around the same amount of days every month. If you're not charting, then that one time, because it happens to every single woman, I feel very confident and comfortable saying that. But that one time where something happens and your ovulation is delayed a couple days, even if it's like 3 or 4 days, you can really get into a stress about your period being quote unquote late, but your period isn't late.
Yeah. That is fascinating. And it's just like learning a new language. Yeah. People have probably told you that before.
Yeah.
But it was like this summer when I was like, what's going on with my body? It was like just a language I didn't speak yet. And now I would have been able to, I mean, I'm sure I would still have questions, but yeah.
But it's interesting because there's a lot of stress around, like when you're just cycling naturally, there's a lot of situations that can be really stressful, whether it's a condom breaking mid-cycle somewhere. So for instance, like if you were using condoms and a condom were to break, you would know that instant whether or not it was a problem. In terms of pregnancy, right? The potential for pregnancy. And so there's a lot of different implications. And there's something else that you said just at the beginning that I picked up on that I wanted to highlight. And you mentioned before I was tracking my periods and I thought that I was, really in the know, but then it turns out there was so much more to the story. And there's a tendency, especially around someone like me who teaches charting and in such great detail, there's a tendency to downplay whatever you were doing, whether it was just noting your periods. And I just wanted to touch on that concept of body literacy, because the concept of body literacy, like people talk about it slightly differently. And I don't know that there's one like perfectly accepted definition, but it's this idea that you have a general sense of what's happening in your cycles. Like you can kind of have a sense of like your periods coming or what happens around ovulation, those types of things. And I think it's really important not to downplay those things that we do as women as we like on our journey. And so for the women who are listening, who've only ever tracked their periods, I mean, you're getting a ton of helpful information, even just for tracking your periods. This one client comes to mind because she had an Excel spreadsheet with her periods for like 5 years. And yeah, it was, we could say, oh, it was just her period. But she had literally like 5 years of her cycle lengths and how they fluctuated throughout her years and things like that. So never downplay the importance of whatever level of knowledge that you have, because at that time you were doing something well beyond, like you did have more knowledge of your cycles because you did have all of this information just from looking at your period. So I think it's important to not downplay the different ways that we just connect with our bodies.
And that kind of reminds me of something you said in one of our very first class sessions, was along the lines of like maybe not downplaying or not feeling bad. Like I remember you said to everyone in the class, like kind of like, don't feel bad or like a terrible person if you like took hormonal birth control like for a long time. And like, I don't know. I remember that, like how you, I can't remember your exact words, but it was a good thing to say.
Well, I think it's really important. I mean, I talk a lot about hormonal birth control. Anyone who's listened to the podcast for a while knows that it's like a hobby of mine just to bash it. But I've taken it, and I took it for a very specific reason. I was like 16 and I liked sports. I was like on the basketball team, the volleyball team, the track team. Like I also did ballet, right? Like I did all these sports, and I had these nightmare periods that were like super heavy and painful. So what kind of like at that time, teenage girls are smart. It's not like I didn't go to the doctor specifically saying what I needed to say to get on the pill. Like that's what my goal was for that appointment, because that's the only thing I was aware of that could solve my problem like in a really quick period of time. So we're all on a process and a journey, and we can really just make the best decisions that we have based on the information that is available to us. So looking back at your years on birth control and kind of crapping all over yourself for like not doing it a different way. I mean, at the time, as a 16-year-old girl, for instance, like that was literally the best thing I knew how to do. And I was doing it for myself so that I could live an easier, more productive life. Like, right. Like I was, and all of us make decisions like that. So I think I'm happy that you brought that up, Dana, because it's really important. It's easy to look back at all those years, especially now, knowing what some of those side effects are. And looking back, you mentioned when you tried it again, and then you had all these effects, and it really stood out to you because you had been in your body cycling naturally for all those years. You know, that's another challenge of going on the hormones at an early age. When you're a grown woman and you're cycling and you're living your life and you're in your body and you're just having that experience, it is quite different to being on hormones. And so it's all just part of our learning and growing, I think.
Yeah. Yep. But I'm very excited for the women who are in their early 20s who are learning this life skill.
Yeah.
As a 38-year-old, I'm very happy for them that they're learning it at a young age when they are in like optimal fertility.
I have to say, it is one of my favorite things. And I probably am too excited because I'm really animated, as you know, but I probably get too excited when I have the opportunity to reach women who are in their early 20s, because I just think you have all these years of cycling that you can do, and you get to enjoy your libido. Because honestly, you know, the pill doesn't do a lot of great things for libido. And I'm really, if for no other reason than just to be able to enjoy it and to just have that full sexual experience, I'm really passionate about that. Because I mean, we don't live in the most sex positive world anyways for women. And there's a lot of stereotypes. So anyway, I could go on for days, but yes to everything you said. So as we bring our session to a close, were there any other thoughts, comments, questions, or anything that you wanted to kind of dive into about your chart or anything else?
No, not right now.
Okay. Well,
yeah, I just want to get some more experience doing it.
Well, I'm really excited for you, especially coming into fertility awareness the way that you did and having that experience of like Like you literally had this experience of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going on with my body. I need to figure this out. And then you fully
Mhm.
did. And so kind of approaching, as we're recording this, it's like the end of the year. So we're kind of approaching the new year, but it's interesting because this puts you a lot more in the driver's seat and in control of all of the things that are happening just around this area of your life. So I'm excited for you.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes.
Yes, you're welcome. And just to kind of close out, for the women who are listening, because I always think of the listeners, like women are listening at all different stages. So some of the listeners, are pregnant and are, or have had a baby recently. And some of the listeners are trying to get pregnant. Some of the listeners are actively avoiding. Some of the listeners are still on the pill and terrified to come off of it because they're convinced that they're going to get pregnant like immediately. And perhaps that's just not where they're at. And so especially for that listener who is contemplating like coming off and using fertility awareness, but scared of getting pregnant, what would you want her to know?
Oh my gosh. Geez, that's a hard one. I would want them to know that I would say that they don't have to do it alone, and that having the right doctor, doctor might not even be the right word, like having the right people. I'm kind of in a spot where like I don't even know if I want to go back to my like normal gynecologist, but like that there are a lot of experts and people that are in the medical field in all different like areas of it, like even like functional medicine doctors, and there's all these different practitioners that can help. And I think for a long time I just went to my gynecologist as like the one source of information, like that's who tells you everything that you need to know. And if they say it's good, it's good. And if they say something is bad, it is. And so what I think that is something that like I would tell someone who is like nervous to go off birth control, but wants to do something else. I would just say like there's a lot of good advice and good people that are practitioners in like women's health. Like you, Lisa, but that there's a lot of different types of doctors and people that can help.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think, yeah, I talk about having that team a lot because we do need doctors. We do need to have our doctor. We, typically do need to have an OB, especially if something happens, right?
Yeah.
But that's not the only person we need. And I feel like that's what really came across in what you said, which is that don't just stop at one.
Yeah. Or like when I had the kind of that bad experience that I talked about in the beginning, and like, if I'm not comfortable with that doctor, like I don't have to go back to her. Like, I think for a long time I thought like, oh, I have to go to her because she's the gynecologist that I see. And like, yeah, it's the, empowering, taking control of your own body. And I think, that's something you say is like, you're the best person to look out for yourself. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes. The empowerment piece of it. Well, and one last question for you, for women who are, they're thinking about fertility awareness. They've heard about this, 10-week program that I do, and they're kind of like, okay, so would this be something for me? Maybe you can share what you got out of it and kind of what you would say to someone who's thinking of whether or not this would be something that they would want to do.
Well, something that comes to mind is like I was telling one of my friends about it, and they were asking if it's a really awkward experience to share, your personal, so much personal detail with like a bunch of girls that are all over the country or the world. Actually, we have girls from all over the world. And like, I was like, yeah, but actually it's not that awkward. Like maybe it's not as awkward as people would think. It might be because we're all just talking about it and we're all like sitting in the comfort of our own home. But, everyone in the group is like willing to share and post photos on the Facebook group. And so I don't feel like it's that awkward. And I think it's really good to be in a group with people that are just like willing to share everything about them. Well, it's very, very personal stuff. So I think we're all getting a lot out of looking at each other's charts and just being like as awkward as we can with each other.
Well, I love that you say that because I mean, for me, like I say this all the time because it's like I've been talking about cervical mucus and vaginas for so long that like, yeah, like it doesn't even faze me. I typically give people like a warning, but for me, it's really kind of natural and normal to talk about all these things. So I really strive to create. I kind of joke about it to kind of soften the environment. We call it TMI Tuesdays, and I make it quite clear that all questions are accepted, and really, I have heard so much that it's really hard to throw me in terms of question. And I feel that what I'm hearing, though, that really comes out is part of the reason it's not that awkward is because you have a group of women who are all really wanting to learn this. And that's why they all jumped in at this particular time. And so it's not like you're legitimately wanting to get that question answered. So if you're like taking a picture of your cervical mucus and like posting it in the comments of your post in the Facebook group and asking me a question, it's because you legitimately are like, okay, this is what I saw. Can you help me figure out how to chart it and what it is? So it's a very respectful and welcoming environment. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm sure a lot of women are like, what is that going to be like talking about my mucus with a bunch of other ladies who have never met in person? Well, thank you so much for being here, Dana. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I really appreciate you sharing your experience and just being so vulnerable and open and honest with your experience with fertility awareness. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/237. I hope that you enjoyed my episode with Dana. It was such a treat to have her on the show, and especially after having been together in the group for, I think it's about 7 weeks. So I think at the time of the recording, we only have a couple of sessions left. And it was a lot of fun just to get to chat with her. And especially because at this point, we've got a couple of charts together and Dana's starting to feel a lot more comfortable just with her charts. So I find it really interesting, just the process of going through the 10 weeks together. The reason that I designed the program to be 10 weeks long is to make sure to have enough time. So the learning portion of it typically takes up the first month or so, where we really go in and go through all of the details and the basics and kind of get the charting information down. And just to give us enough time to go through the mucus observations, best practices with taking your temperature, and then of course cervical position, which again is an optional sign, but I always encourage my clients to at least take that opportunity when we're together to check it, so that at least you kind of have it in your back pocket if you ever need it. And then the second half of the course is a bit different because once everyone is kind of set up with charting, we've got all the basic stuff down, the questions become a bit more nuanced. So it goes from really just trying to get kind of a handle on everything to then these quite nuanced questions about cervical mucus, and then also getting to the additional part of fertility awareness, which is once you get a sense of how to define the fertile window and how that all works and how to use this as a method, if you're trying to conceive, how to time sex correctly, if you're trying to avoid, how to define that window and how to apply the rules so that you're really comfortable and confident knowing how to do this, then the conversation typically shifts to more of the overall health implications and what does it mean if I don't have as much mucus, and what does it mean if my luteal phase is short, and all of those types of things. And I really liked how Dana described it because she really was looking for birth control, but then got like much more than she bargained for, just with this whole other language, as she called it, which is what it is really. I often refer to it as like the mucus language, but it really is. It's this additional window. It's a different way of relating to your body. And it's this additional piece of information that just it allows you to look at your body in such a different way in your cycle, especially in our culture where we're not really that cycle positive, to say the least. And many women have relationships with their cycles, with their bodies that aren't that positive. Many women struggle with painful, difficult periods. Not even necessarily painful. Some women struggle with irregular cycles, not knowing when their periods are coming, and just a variety of different menstrual cycle complaints. And within our current healthcare system, there's not a whole lot for women that have issues with their cycles, right? It's just go on the pill and that's it. And so we have this conflicted relationship with our cycles. And fertility awareness is often the first opportunity to learn about your cycles, learn what a crucial role they play just in your overall health and understanding, and really give you that opportunity to relate to your cycles in a more positive way and to start to realize that you're not separate from them. Your cycles are always reflecting what's happening in your life and in your health. And I feel like it's unbelievably empowering as women to just have it. And once you have it, then it's so basic, and it's so, you kind of get to the point where you can't even remember life without it, because it's just, once you start to see that relationship, it's just this thing that you can take for granted. And it just seems so obvious, right? As soon as someone tells you about your mucus and you start to chart it, or your temperature rise, or any of the different signs we're paying attention to, it just seems so obvious now. And so it's just so like, oh, well, of course, of course I can tell when I'm ovulating, or of course I can, predict when my period's coming. It just becomes so second nature. So I love helping women to connect to that. And obviously that's why I've been podcasting for 4 years and continue to release episodes. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it is because of the difference it can make in your life. It seems kind of strange that just, checking for cervical mucus and paying attention to these fertile signs can make such a big difference in your life and your quality of life, but it does. And one of the things that happens, one of the side benefits that you didn't expect, and I love how Dana spoke about this at the very end of our session today, was about how you kind of discover along this road that concept that, I do get to decide what is best for me, because you can now you have this tool to see how different things affect you. You have this knowledge that allows you to opt out of hormonal birth control if you want to. So all of a sudden now you have this option where if I don't want to use hormonal birth control, I actually have a valid option that is effective, that I can be in control of, that I can learn how to do. And it really just leaves you feeling empowered. It's really empowering to be able to have the choice not to use hormones, and to feel really, really confident in that decision. And to know that provided that you continue to use the method correctly, that you don't have to worry every cycle, am I going to be pregnant, if you're actively avoiding. And on the flip side, when you're ready to conceive, you, again, still have that knowledge and power, that knowledge of your cycle, of knowing exactly when in your cycle you can conceive. And having that ability to look at your cycle and know whether or not it is falling within the normal parameters, and to have that additional heads up when there is something wrong. So there's so many different ways that fertility awareness empowers you, which is why I just absolutely love sharing about it. So thank you, a special thank you again to Dana for coming on the show and sharing her experience. It was just a great episode and a really great time, an opportunity for us to chat a bit more and to really dive into her charts. And so at the time of this recording, I still have a few spaces open for my 10-week Fertility Awareness Mastery group program. Make sure to head over to fertilityfriday.com/group program for details about the program, and make sure to apply. We only have about 2 weeks before we're starting, and I'd love to have you in there. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/group program. And I want to thank you for spending some time with me today, for supporting the show and spreading the word. This show really has grown via word of mouth. It's really one woman talking to another woman, and that's how the show has been spreading. That's how women have found it. And so I really appreciate all of you for just being part of the Fertility Friday community and continuing to spread the word about fertility awareness and body literacy. It's really, really interesting what can happen when, a bunch of women get together and start making a ruckus and drawing attention to this essential, extremely important part of ourselves, and just shedding some light on it. So I'm really happy that you're a part of that. And with that said, I hope you have a great week, weekend, year, whenever you're listening to this episode. And until next time, be well and happy charting.